So all oh, I just fine. I did it again.
All right. Hello, friends and neighbors. We are so glad that you are here at another rousing episode of Low Brass U Studio Class. It's your favorite class where you get a pass to be crass. Just kidding, you're not allowed to swear, and neither are we. I would like to bring in my esteemed colleague, the head honcho, Mr. Zach.
Yes, definitely please no swears. That is our mantra. It's not really about low brass stuff. It's all about just not swearing.
That's it.
But yeah, did a little introductory playing of what is one of the Kentucky All-State Etudes. So Connor and I are both from not the state, but the Commonwealth of Kentucky. So you'd think it would be Kentucky All-Commonwealth Etudes. I think that would be more proper. But again, they didn't consult me. I feel like I say that a lot. It's just like, yeah, I don't make all these decisions. But I think that was a big miss. They're only
theme of Low Brass U actually. No one asked us.
Right. Hashtag didn't ask. But yeah, see, because there are only two commonwealths, right? Am I correct in that? It's Virginia and Kentucky, or there are two more. I think there are four.
You quiz me about how many commonwealths there are every time that this comes up, and every time I tell you I don't know, and then you tell me, and I immediately forget the second after you tell me. So this is new every time.
Massachusetts is another one. Let's see. Pennsylvania. So I got 2 of 4. Not a passing grade, but A grade. So. But yeah, so I think we kind of talked about some ideas for what we'll kind of cover today, and it seemed to make sense that we should maybe talk about some back to school topics. I think that's it's important for most of us. I think a lot of careers in music have to do with school timing, even if they're not necessarily school related. Like orchestral seasons tend to kind of mirror schooling. Most of those are getting started pretty soon here, or have already started. And we're both going back to school as educators. So I know for me, it's like summer's definitely over. Summer's already over for you, correct?
School doesn't start until September 1st is our first day of classes, but we're showing up to the building, we're doing training, we're learning how to do new stuff with new software, so summer is over, yes.
Yeah.
Technically.
Yeah, technically tomorrow is the first day of one of the universities that I'll be teaching at, Tarleton State. They start this Thursday. But it's kind of the same, at UNT also. North Texas doesn't start tomorrow. They start on Monday, but I've got auditions for both of them tomorrow. So almost my entire day is all around auditions. So let's hope that everybody's been practicing. Because if not, everything will be ruined. No, everything will be okay, but
everything is going to be ruined.
But yeah, I'm interested in, got tuba auditions at UNT in the morning, and then I have to drive 120 miles to Tarleton State out in Stephenville, and then we'll have, I think I have trombone auditions first, then euphonium auditions, if I remember correctly. Can't remember the order, but so I'm looking forward to that, especially there, because I don't really know all of those students that well at this point, so I'll get to hear everyone play individually for the first time. I've only heard a handful of them so far.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely looking forward to that. But it's definitely get your syllabus or syllabi done, all of those sorts of things. It's that time of year. But I think, as far as back to school as a player, especially if you're maybe a high school student, middle school student, something along those lines, or a university student, I think it's a good time to be, practicing some good habits in our playing and in our just overall approach to things. What are some of the things kind of that you try to focus on, coming into a new year, as far as maybe just practicing things? Are there do you have some goals, generally speaking, or maybe even this year?
Generally speaking, I mean, I think that for people who are in school or in academics or in music or teach or students, we kind of have like a fresh start. I feel like my New Year's resolutions usually happen around this time of year as opposed to happening in like January 1st. Like January 1st, like I'm just getting revved up for like the second semester. Like I'm in the middle of like all of my stuff. I'm not in time to like be like reevaluating. I do a little bit of that. But as far as like setting myself up for like healthy routines, I try to, as things come to me in the academic world, as far as like workload, things that I have to take care of, new schedules, I'm trying to figure out like what's the most effective and the most sustainable version of me as a trombone player, me as a low brass musician that's going to exist in this new academic year. And so usually that starts off pretty idyllic, but I also like, try to figure out like a good gauge of what my responsibilities are going to be academically, when those things are going to happen either during the day or when those things are going to happen during the week, and then figure out spots in my work week where I know trombone can happen sustainably. And when I say sustainably, I mean like I don't try to practice so much and like add too much stuff into my schedule so that like 10 weeks into the semester I just quit and then everything is bad, which I do a lot. But I shouldn't say 10 weeks, more like 2 weeks. You know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, that's one of the things that I'm always wary of. And that, for me, to make it the most effective, is I try to get those routines set up before, as much as possible, like before classes start. So like usually early August, end of July, I'm looking at things like, what's my sleep hygiene like? Am I going to bed at the same time every night? How many hours of sleep am I getting? During the day, when I'm not doing work, what are the times that I know I'm going to be free? And let's start the habit now of making trombone happen during that time. Like for me, it's like long tones happen in the early morning. That's just how it works. It's like I drink coffee in the morning and I'm like, I want to play long tones. So I have the budget time before my work starts for school to do that, which means waking up a little bit earlier. It also means finding a place, a location where I can do my long tones, which right now is inside of my car, because long tones have been banished from the house, and I don't contest that because sometimes it is really loud. I do work on it as soft as possible. Like, a wide repertoire of dynamic ranges. But
you can't do everything in a mute or everything soft.
No, and after living in an apartment in Chicago for 3 years, I don't think I can ever go back to doing long tones in a practice mute. It just made me so sad. So I would rather do it in the backseat of my car than with a little mute.
I've definitely been fortunate, probably throughout all my life, just like kind of randomly getting lucky with the people that lived near me or lived with me, from being a child, living with my parents, and I have one sister, and music was definitely a part of that household. So it's, I was mostly allowed to play. I did have hour restrictions. I never was concerned with pushing those at the morning, though. That's definitely not. That's very rare that that's a problem of mine, of playing too early in the morning. Playing too late at night definitely is more common. My parents always cut it off at 9:30, and I lived with it. It was fine. But when in college, I was fortunate having a dorm that had practice rooms in it. It was definitely a feature that was nice. And then there's also a practice building not too far away. But even when I lived in Chicago, my one neighbor that I talked to, who lived directly above me, said that he liked the music, and I don't think he was being sarcastic. I don't
understand that.
I can only be so sure, but he seemed really genuine. He seemed really nice, so I always kind of believed him. And then also even in undergrad when I lived with roommates, they teased me about certain excerpts. Like they they always would say, "What's that?" Because they're both guitar majors, jazz guitar majors, so they don't know their tuba excerpts as well as they should, which is really disappointing. I think everyone should, but they would always ask me, "What's that 1-5-1-5-1 excerpt?" And so that excerpt being Fountains of Rome, being 5-1-5-1, and then 3-1. You know, they're always teasing me on that. Let's see, is this KPOP? I feel like it's not K-pop, but could be wrong. Has a question. Got any tips for tonguing for trombone? I'm struggling with that. I feel like, Connor, of the two, I feel like you've thought more about tonguing than...
Man, I have thought so much about tonguing recently. You have just come to the right place. Oh, did you see what?
Yeah.
Oh, that's sweet.
My father chimed in saying he always liked the music. He was probably the one who liked it the most around the house and was the most understanding. Not to say anybody else was not understanding, but I have memories of, because I also used to play drums as a child. I remember my dad just being like asleep in the same room or near that room while I was playing drums with no issues. So, but continue on your tonguing talk.
So I've been thinking about that a lot, and because I come from a place where cleanliness of articulation and consistency of articulation are not like my natural preset tendencies. Like if I just play the trombone without thinking about what I'm going to do first, those are things that do not come naturally to me. I've never really considered myself particularly gifted in that field, and so I've spent the past like year, or really kind of like a couple of years, like really reevaluating, and maybe a little bit of paralysis by analysis, like maybe thinking a little too hard about articulation. And what I've concluded is that the problem in my cleanliness personally for me, it wasn't the type of articulation, it wasn't how hard or how soft I was articulating. The problem with me was more like the short answer that no one ever really likes is, oh, it's just your air. And like, that's right. And teachers that tell you that are right to say that, but I think it's also a lazy answer because there's more to it. And specifically for me, a more specific diagnosis would have alleviated immeasurable hours of practicing. I'm not saying that this is the one thing that has fixed it. I'm just saying that recently I found a new video of James Markey talking about articulation that really helped me.
And he's okay at the trombone.
He's okay at the trombone. What he said was, it wasn't a matter of the articulation, the actual act of the tonguing being bad. It's a matter of hand-eye coordination, or really for us, tongue slide coordination of like, when do you move the slide to change the position, and when inside of that movement should you make the articulation with the air. And his thing that he found with most of his students was that they were moving their slide before they needed to. They were rushing that because the slide moving, that's the greater amount of work. Like if we're putting this, in kind of like a dramatic scenario, going from 1 to 7, that movement of sticking your arm out really far is a lot more work than just going with your tongue, which doesn't actually make a noise at all. And so you're thinking, oh, I'll make this easier for me. I'll start this just a microsecond earlier and get there. And so I don't have a trombone on me right now, but I wish I could show you the example. Maybe Zach can show us something. He was doing it on, it was one of the Bordonis. That one. Yeah, that thing.
Key?
In G?
Maybe, yeah. Whatever.
I think that was the one that he was doing it on. And what he was trying to do was like, oh, what was the exercise? It was, oh, how did he do it? I need to go grab a trombone. I'll be right back. I need to explain. Can you talk about something while I go grab a trombone?
I definitely can talk.
All right.
So I think a couple of things that Connor touched on that I think are really important is the word coordination. I think that getting everything together is definitely the important thing. And as far as moving the slide go, I think I agree. It's obviously easy to agree with James Markey, but I agree that I think people move their slide too early. I always talk about slide movement being as late as possible and as fast as possible. So that kind of helps with both of those fronts, meaning that you move it right at the very last second, right before the note. And then, obviously you also want to move as fast as you can as well. I'll give you back your spot.
All right, so the two extreme examples of this, I'll just play like 3 notes. And the thing that I often do incorrectly is I move my slide before I need to. And if I did that, if I really exaggerated that motion, it would sound like this. Right?
Can you turn the gain down?
Oh yeah, definitely. And so what I want to do is articulate and then move my slide. And slowly kind of like shorten that amount of time that you do it. I think that was what he was talking about. And then slowly make it faster. And just speed that up until it's distorted to the fact that it's like you're like articulating right at the point that you're actually moving the slide, as opposed to moving the slide and then articulating. And that like really has helped me, because what I realized was like I was trying to get faster and cleaner, and by doing that I was overcorrecting my slide technique. I was moving my arm early, and that was what was causing some of the discrepancies. So that's a really long-winded answer for like, that's just something that I figured out recently that, I don't know, I hadn't heard it yet. And so I thought that'd be a fun thing to share.
Yeah, I think a lot of that's good. Yeah, I don't know what the video that you're talking about. I definitely have not watched as many of the Markey videos as of lately. Just kind of forgot about him a little bit. I think he's still relatively active. I think a lot of people got more active on these sorts of platforms, through the global situation, and some of that might be dying down as far as just being on YouTube or Instagram or whatever as frequently. But anything James Markey has to say, I'd listen. I won't promise that I'll agree with anything or everything that anyone says, but if James Markey says it, I'm at least listening. So yeah, I think that the coordination is just such an important thing. I always think about, nothing that we do is really that difficult, but if it's not happening all at the right time, it's not going to work. So I always think about making sure my fingers, my slide, my air, my tongue, all of those sorts of things, are going to be helpful. So just to make sure that they're all together at the same time. So yeah, we've got a producer in the house today, I guess.
All right, gain's back up,
Okay.
Everybody. How does it sound? Does it sound like my gain is back up?
Maybe just
I can go hotter.
I was going to say maybe a little too hot.
All right. We'll cool it down. How's
yeah, I think that's fine.
All right.
But yeah, so yeah, the coordination of all that I think is really the key of making sure that it all happens right at the right time, and it takes some time to kind of figure that out. And I think the thing that's always forgotten is that slow practice is how we help that process along. So you were demonstrating slowly, but you didn't really mention how important slow practice is. And I think that's something I always think about. It's like, none of this is hard. It's just hard to do without the repetitions of doing it really slowly. That's something that I always practice. I have so many students that practice their scales and just only play it fast, make a mistake here, make a mistake there, but they just only practice it fast. And I always tell them it's not going to get better that way. You have to practice it slowly.
Definitely.
I guess I'm getting swatted today.
One thing that helps with the slow practicing thing to keep me in check with that, because I'll stop doing it. Like, it's one of those things that I'll read and I'll be like, yeah, everyone has to do that. Definitely. I'm going to definitely practice slow all the time. And then I just don't do it. I set like active projects within my like large long-term goals that I force myself to go slowly on. And one way to do that is to have like a simple exercise or maybe part of your warm up that you do every day, and just like pick the slowest possible tempo that you can even think of, or like you still recognize the exercise, and then commit to like 1 beat per minute a day of increase. And I've been doing that. I'm on 105 beats per minute right now, starting from, I think, 55. So it's been 50 days, I guess. I've been doing Clark number 2 in all, well, not more than all keys. It's more like in all practical registers. That's been like my scale articulation warm up for, I guess, 50 days now. And so that's been fun. Like, it always reminds me like, oh, we do things slow, and like I increase like the increment slowly. And like now when I listen back to videos of myself practicing, like just to like check my progress, it's like I notice a difference in the tempo between like a month ago and today, but I have not yet noticed like a difference in like my physical approach to the exercise, as far as like I don't feel like the speed is increasing. I mean, there's a certain point where it's just like it's gonna feel fast all of a sudden, or like something about like the mechanism of you playing the trombone is gonna have to change because it's just gonna get faster. But when it's going that slow, between like smaller increases in the tempo, you don't actually notice that increase, and that means like, you know, you're probably doing the right things.
Yeah, I think all of those things are really helpful to think about. And you know, slow practice, it's one of those things. It's like, I was told for so many years to practice things slowly. You know, all my teachers always said that, as I'm sure most of our viewers, and I'm sure your teachers as well, always said, do the slow practice. And I just always remember thinking, just like, whatever, I'm not doing that. You know, I wouldn't say that, but those were the thoughts that were in my head when I was, you know, 17. And I didn't do it. And then I finally learned to do it. And, you know, I guess I learned that how effective it was. That was what did it. It wasn't just doing it. It was doing it, seeing the results, realizing that was really the key. And it's definitely helped me a ton to this point. But yeah, slow practice. If you're not doing slow practice, you're not using all of your tools that you can to make yourself better. But I think you also touched on recording yourself and how important that is too. And, you know, I definitely look back at like when I started doing some stuff on like Instagram, like so early social media stuff, you know, years ago. That was just a product of me recording myself all the time, and then occasionally being moderately satisfied with the result that I got, and deciding that it was okay to have that be heard on the internet. And I think that's, you know, there are many problems with social media. There are many problems with social media as it pertains to musicians. But I think that there are some benefits like that, you know, like the 100 days of practice or things like that, that can be really helpful as an educational tool. And I've had students where I've kind of made them do it, you know, sometimes on just like having a private account, but you have to post daily, you have to post weekly, you know, you have to be working on something and recording it just to force them to listen to themselves. And I think that that's something that we take for granted. I'm not just saying, you know, some of my students' age or even our ages, we all take it for granted how easy it is to record yourself these days. I remember recording myself on like a 4-track cassette recorder. You know, hand me down equipment from my dad of recording stuff, and you know, that sort of stuff. It was way harder to record yourself. I remember I had this other little device that I'd record myself on, and it's, you know, now most likely you have a cell phone, you know, depending on your age and things, but a lot of us have cell phones. They all have decent microphones in them. They have decent cameras on them. You have a lot of tools at your, you know, on the ready, that are in your pocket, ready to go at all times, that I think can really be educational and help you kind of progress in ways that were a little bit harder to do. I don't know if you've had teachers who do things like this, that like one of my teachers had literally a record, you know, he'd like record, or not record, he'd record to tape, like to a reel to reel recording in the lesson. And it's just like,
oh, wow.
Yeah, you don't have to do that. It's not. We're
That's
past that
intense.
time. But it's like he'd use that as, and he was the reason why I started slowing my stuff down when I was listening to it, because he would play it back at half speed, and it would drop down an octave, but it would every rhythmic error, every articulation would be under a microscope, and that's definitely something that I still use. I just do it maybe a little bit more digitally. So KPOP also says, what tips do you have with getting comfortable with the metronome?
Ooh.
Do you want to start or should I start?
Why don't you start? I think I started last time. You start.
So I think one of the things with the metronome that is good and bad is that you have to do it in a way that is actually helping you. And I know that may seem like, if I'm using the metronome, because everybody tells you, practice this with a metronome, but how are you practicing with a metronome? Is that actually making you better, or is that doing what you're told? And you should generally be doing what you're told. Your teacher probably has a better idea than you do on how to practice things. But I think with the metronome, it's really easy to just turn it on and not have any sort of benefit to that, or have little benefit. So one of the big things I do with a lot of my students, and this isn't, you'll hear this, you might think more that this is a jazz person thing or something, but it's not just for that. But I practice with a metronome on 2 and 4 probably more often than I do on 1 and 3 or on all 4 beats. And to me, that strengthens my own personal time, because I have to be focused. I'm more responsible for what I'm doing. And there's just a little bit more work involved mentally for me. Do you have any thoughts about that, Connor?
Definitely. I mean, I think that that can expand to be an entire world of not only practicing, but like brain enrichment for you, and fun of like figuring out fun ways to trick your brain into using the metronome for like different little practice devices like that. And one of the things that I've really gotten into recently that I didn't do, I remember like my undergrad professor was like, I want you to practice the ride where the metronome is on like the 16th note, like where like that is like the thing that it clicks as opposed to clicking the downbeat. And like he showed me him like playing it, and I was like, absolutely, I will never will I do that. Like that does not sound like any fun at all. But then through like getting used to it, I think one of the gateways was using it, practicing it on 2 and 4, and taking away beat 1 so that you have to hear or you're responsible for it, and then seeing like maybe have it only on beat 4, or maybe have it only on beat 2. Now it's your rim click from your drum player, or maybe put it just on like the and of 2, or like some weird displacement like that, and see like how close you can get it to like where everything grooves up. And then all of a sudden you're gonna like putting it on the and of 2 on like tuba mirum is really fun, because it feels very silly in the very first part, and you don't really know, unless you can really, really hear all the eighth notes, you don't really know if you're right until you get into those eighth notes in like the second section of it all. And I don't know, it's a lot of fun.
But that level of concentration just isn't there normally. It's like that, or for most of us, it's not there normally, but it forces you to have a level of focus.
Right, and you'll know that you have a newfound level of focus, because then you'll play whatever excerpt it is you're working on, whatever piece of music, and you'll hear that random boop on the and of 2 like in your brain. It's like, oh, time is there. One other thing I've noticed is like you said something that I probably needed to hear a lot earlier in my life, which is like, don't just turn the metronome on and like forget about it. I've like always thought that I was the type of person that was like really concentrating on the time. Like I was like, man, I'm really like getting into this. Like I'm definitely zoned in. And I think that like as I've done more time with the metronome, and like I've constantly been trying to direct myself being more mindful of where my time is at all times. And I think earlier in my playing, I just thought that like me turning on the metronome meant that I was mindful. And I've been noticing like this week, I was playing Clark 2s in my car, like you do, and I noticed like certain places inside of Clark 2 that I consistently rush and get away from the time. And it's like, wow, like I've probably played Clark 2 like a lot in my life, and I bet I've probably been rushing that same spot my whole life, and just like I've only now becoming sensitive enough to catch the discrepancy in my time that's like not to my liking. So I think the more that you do it, the more sensitive you'll become. And even if it sounds perfect now, it's like just like if you keep listening in, you might find more things to fix.
Yeah, I think that that's very true. You know, today on YouTube, I put out the Bear solo from Petrushka, and you know that's an excerpt that I know pretty well at this point. I've played in many auditions. I've advanced in rounds where I've had to play that. It's been it's not one of those excerpts that I would say that I'm really scared of, but it was just interesting recording it because I got there were probably 4 or 5 times where I was like, okay, that's the take. Put the tuba down. I can start putting together the video, and then I listened back, and it's just like these 2 notes are just not precisely where they're supposed to be. They're close, but they're just not exactly. It's like if I could just shift them over a little bit, which I realized digitally I could do that, but that's not what I do. So it's just they weren't exactly placed, so I had to stop, redo it, listen back. Oh, again, like I'm not perfectly in that groove of those notes. So I think that's recording yourself again. Going back to that, it can tell you if you're, what your situation is. And I always tell my students to, and I do this myself, to slow it down to 50%, because any rhythmic error you have if you go to 50%, you double how egregious that error is. So sometimes you may not have the rhythmic precision to catch your own error, but if you slow it down to 50%, you kind of have a higher likelihood of being able to even notice it, maybe in some cases.
Mm-hmm. I had another thought.
Yeah.
And this goes back to I didn't mean to get away from metronomes, but it was kind of like I want to go back to the tonguing thing really quick because I remembered something important. I just read that book. This Is Your Brain on Music. Was that David Levine? I think is the author of that one, and it's a cool book for a lot of reasons. One thing they did talk about was articulation or like attacks of notes, and when I was doing my long tones, like trying to get that together, one of the things I've always naturally focused on is like I'll like play the note, and then while the tone is standing in the air, I'll still continually be trying to improve the tone like as it's going. Have you ever caught yourself doing that before, Zach?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like oh, like you start the note, you sit there for a while, and no matter what you start with, it could be the best attack you've ever had. You always think in your head, this tone could be better, and then you give it a little bit of juice while you're in the middle of the long tone. And one of the things they talked about in that book was that if you take a sine wave, well, it would be a sine wave, you take a standing wave from like instruments in similar families, or even some, like it could be more different than you think. And if you cut off the release and you cut off the attack and you move those around to different middle sections, they're often indistinguishable. Like the middle part of a standing wave of a trombone playing a note versus a French horn versus a trumpet is remarkably similar.
Yeah, I think that goes back to I think that goes back to a study that at Indiana University that they did, a long time ago, where they basically did that. I think the way they did it was they had like a bunch of graduate students, and they chopped off, it was like with tape, so they like actually chopped it off, mm-hmm. and played them all back to back. And I think it was like almost like random chance for people to guess the correct instruments.
Yeah, they couldn't guess it.
Right.
That's exactly it. And we're talking about the same thing. And so what I've tried to think about with articulation, this is also kind of related to timing of things, is like whatever note I start with, I stick with it. And I'm rethinking like, my relationship to playing in time and playing in tone or in tune, or playing a beautiful note of like, it has to start as beautiful as it's going to finish. You know what I mean? And like whatever it is, it's like, even if it isn't really up to my standards, like I'm trying to train myself to live with what I start with, to kind of create more of a mindset of consistency and like improve from there, as opposed to like accepting something that's not my best and then improving it halfway through, blowing through a whole note, which is like, you wouldn't do that if you were a painter and you're like, wow, the front of this brushstroke just looks awful. Better lay into it. I mean, I don't know because I've never like painted a picture like that professionally, but I imagine, you would go over that line and start over.
Yeah, that analogy is above my pay grade. Maybe we should get my uncle, who is a painter, on. He'd be the expert in the field. I'm sure he'd come on if I asked him, but I'm sure there's some good parallels. But yeah, I think that, going back to the articulation thing, one of the things that I really try to think about, and I kind of forgot to bring this up earlier, is, again, Connor was talking about the air being the most important thing. I really believe that you should be able to play without tonguing at all, just air attacks, and it should sound pretty good. I think that I always think about the tonguing as being the icing on the cake and not the cake itself. And the cake itself is the air. That's like the analogy that I always use, which I'm always guilty of too many food analogies. And I've tried to do better over the years, but I guess it just tells you where my mind's at sometimes. But I always ask the question, if you're having this cake and the icing is really good, but the cake itself is really dry and it's just really terrible, is it good cake? Like, I don't think so. But you can have cake without icing if the cake is good enough. And then in the perfect world, at least in my perfect world, you have a really nice cake. I know some people don't like icing, but imagine if you don't like icing, imagine you do for the sake of the analogy. But you get a really good cake, and then on top of that, you have a really nice icing that's not overpowering. It's not doing anything it doesn't need to do. It's just kind of enhancing it a little bit, and it just polishes it. So I kind of think about it that way, and that your air is really doing all the work, and that's something you really want to make sure is being taken care of. So, yeah, I think that tonguing also in that way, or thinking about it in that way, kind of helps us get out of this zone of having such an internal focus when we're playing. I think that sometimes can make it harder when we're thinking about what's happening here. When I'm playing, generally speaking, if I'm playing the way I like to play, I'm not really thinking about what I'm doing right here. I'm not thinking firm corners. I'm sure they're firm or whatever. I'm not thinking about those things. I'm trying to think more out in the hall, out in the room. Those are more I feel like I have more success when I think that way, and I think focusing on tonguing, like right here, like where's my tongue in my mouth? What shape is it making? Those sorts of things. I don't deny that they're real. I just struggle to accept that they're always as helpful as some people make them out to be. But I also don't have all the answers.
Right.
I may not even have any of them.
I don't know. We've managed to like 37 minutes of possible answers so far, so that's pretty good.
Right, there you go.
More research is needed.
Right.
I had one other comment about metronome stuff, and I'm glad that KPOP has asked great questions today, because it made me look for an old metronome app that I used to have. And Zach, or anybody who's listening, let me know if there's another one that does this. But I used to have this app, and it looks like you can still get it, called Time Trainer. They have rebranded as Metronome and Time Trainer by some company called Justin Guitar. And the thing that I used to love about this metronome, it was the one I used all in undergrad and early grad school, is that it had this function called the random beat dropper. And so what you could do is you set your metronome to...
Oh, you can't see that at all. But I use one that has the same sort of thing, random mute on Time Guru.
Okay, Time Guru. And it has like a thing where you can set like a certain percentage of the beats, like 10% of the beats are just going to not be there. Like 1 in 10 beats is just going to randomly drop one of them, or 1 in, you could make it 1 in 2, you have 50%, or, or more. And that was something that like really, like, that was a big light bulb moment for me of like the beat inside my brain is equally important, and like is ultimately what is driving the music, and not the beat on my phone. The beat on my phone is to help me manifest the beat in my head.
Right. Yeah. I use that all the time in Time Guru, and I don't know if the one that you were talking about has this feature at all, or did have this feature or whatever. But what's nice about Time Guru is that you can set these different metronomes for things. So like I have a Ride of the Valkyries metronome saved, and so that has that dotted 8th, 16th, 8th rhythm just going all the time. Bum bum ba-dum bum ba-dum bum ba-dum bum. And then you combine that with the, removal of beats, and it's like there are all these times where you only have the 16th note, you only have the dotted 8th, you only have the, you have all these different spots, and there's like a magical moment where you really have it up here. And then the phone just confirms it, or the app just confirms what you're doing. And I don't profess to have perfect time. We all struggle with it on maybe different levels and things, but there are some really magical moments when that's just really working. And one other note about metronome practice and time and things that I said this the other day to a student is just that. I think we talk a lot about sound. We talk a lot about tone. I think that that's valuable. I'm not saying you're going to be playing in the Chicago Symphony with a bad sound on your instrument. Like, I don't think that you're just going to win a job or, have whatever success means to you. I'm not sure that you do that with sounding bad on your instrument. But I feel almost more strongly that if your time's not good, it's you won't reach that level of success. I think because to me, time is the closest thing in this art form to being black and white. Being a concrete, this is correct or this is incorrect sort of thing.
Right.
And I think that that's something that we take for granted because what is Connor, mathematically tell me what the best tone is. Give me some numbers. Can you give me numbers?
I could tell you. Right.
There, I mock that, but also, there are some ways where we can talk about it. We can look at some spectral analysis of things. We can look into it, but at the end of the day, there's kind of a spectrum. I would say that there are very clear bad sounds, but there are lots of different good sounds. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of a personal thing sometimes, or oftentimes. And even intonation, people will say, well, it's like, that's mathematical, we can talk about that. And it's like, yeah, in a perfect world, it's mathematical. Mm-hmm. But what tuning system are you using? Are we so fortunate that the whole world is equal temperament or just intonation? It's usually somewhere in the middle. We can't perfectly live in this world of perfect ratios, and we can't. Sometimes we're playing with a piano where we have to play with equal temperament. And sometimes that doesn't sound good even if it is correct. And sometimes we're playing in an orchestra or playing in a band where you're playing with this instrument and they go one way. Do you follow them, or do you say that it's correct because my tuner says it's correct? So my point is that, rhythm, meter, time, all of those words, which are all different but all kind of wrapped into this idea, there is a little bit more of a consensus of what's right or wrong. Mm-hmm. And so tossing it aside and saying that tone is like the only thing that matters, which I feel like people do sometimes. I'm not trying to call anybody out, but that's something that I've seen sometimes in educational circles, both as a student and as a teacher, where I feel like there's a little bit too much of an emphasis put on tone. Tone's important, don't get me wrong, but time is also very important.
Definitely.
So I think, especially thinking about playing professionally and things, when I'm looking at finding someone as a sub, or finding, especially someone that I'm playing with, maybe like someone who's subbing for someone who I regularly play with, and thinking about, they could have the world's greatest sound, but if their time is bad, kind of don't care that they have the world's greatest sound. Whereas, obviously, if you put any category so low, you don't want to play with them. But,
right.
At the end of the day, it's like choosing a car in a racing game. It's like the perfect one is the one with the maximum acceleration, the maximum speed, and, can take the most damage, or whatever your game says. But we want all categories to be perfect, obviously. But there are some that you can get away with some matter more than others in certain situations, I guess is a good way to put it.
I guess you.
There's kind of a tangent that I feel like was related, but
I always liked picking Yoshi.
Yoshi on Mario Kart.
Yeah, my dad was a Toad. He was a Toad guy.
It depends, that gets into what game are we playing, especially because I think I probably logged the most hours on Mario Kart 64 and Double Dash for the GameCube.
64, what do you pick?
Luigi all the time. So much so that I would purposefully make sure I got the second controller, because no one's usually fighting over the second controller. And the point of that is that's where it starts. That's where the cursor starts. So if you're the second controller,
you're preset as Luigi.
It's on you to move away from Luigi. No one can force you off. So, and again, when you're playing with all your cousins or whatever, no one's fighting over the second controller. People want the first controller because that's, you get to click the buttons and you're kind of in control of things.
Right.
I'm always about the second controller. I'd go right to Luigi.
Wow.
But that, things had to change once we went to Double Dash. Those special items, they made things different.
It already got too complicated for me by the time we got to Double Dash. I gave up and I was just like, I'm going to pick random things every time.
Yeah, I was usually a Baby Bowser and Diddy Kong person, but I would also accept double Baby Mario, like Baby Mario and Baby Luigi. Those are because it was much harder to get the characters you wanted because you had to get two of them, so you had to have backups. But Baby Bowser was my first go-to, those large Bowser shells. But anyway, you probably didn't come to Low Brass U Studio class to hear about Mario Kart. But, maybe that's an Easter egg. Maybe at some point there'll be some giveaway and a question will be, what are Zach and Connor's Mario Kart characters?
Mm-hmm. I have another conceptual kind of, this almost is kind of like a social emotional learning thing, like trying to articulate like our feelings about, like, if you could be a race car, what would you be? I thought of a really good question. It's kind of been on my head for like a couple of weeks now. It's kind of fun to have a space to talk about it. And it falls into our art analogy theme. I've been thinking about this from the scope of trombone fundamentals. I've also been thinking about this in the scope of improvisation, of like listening to people play a low brass instrument and imagine if this were visual art, let's limit it to like drawing utensils. Like, what drawing utensil would you equate your sound or your musical goal to? And like to give you an example, it's like when I think of like Andy Martin playing really fast bebop, I think of like a micron pen or like a mechanical pencil, just small. It's
0.5 lead.
It's just like a perfect little line. The shade of the graphite never changes. You might even be doing it against a ruler. Just perfect, consistent, just precise little line every time. Whereas and then you listen to like Vincent Gardner play a plunger solo on Did You Call Her Today? I think of like a very stylized paintbrush that's like larger than my hand with like big bristles. You know what I mean? That like where you can see when they would draw a line with like black ink, you can see like all these little frills and from like the individual fibers of like the tone. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, this reminds me of another. I use a somewhat similar analogy, but maybe more in like how to use your air with paint. And so I always take it back to this movie that probably fewer and fewer people have seen, but it was one of my favorite movies growing up. The movie Like Mike with Lil Bow Wow before he dropped the LIL apostrophe. And Jonathan Lipnicki, and who else was in that movie? There are other people in that movie, but have you seen that movie, Connor?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so this has a point. So with the paint thing, one of my favorite parts of that movie is Lil Bow Wow's character is doing well. He's on the team. They're doing well. He's hanging out with his buddy on the basketball team, and they're painting like different offenses on like the wall outside, and then he doesn't want him to get it on like the window or something. It's something like that. And I always think about how he just jams the paintbrush all the way into the bucket, and normally if you're painting something, you'd brush it off a little bit, you'd make sure that it's not just dripping, but he dunks it in there and then just smears it across. They're just lines coming down. That's how I think about using my air, especially playing tuba and stuff. It's just like the maximum amount I can get on this brush. It's just that air, which is maybe how you were kind of describing Vincent's sound a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But yeah, I think there are some good analogies with how painting and things that make sense as far as air and sound and stuff goes like that, because they're all at some level most of them are valid. Maybe not all approaches are valid, but for a lot of them are talking about the difference between Andy Martin and Vincent Gardner. They do very different, I guess not very different things. They're both under the category of jazz trombonists who frequently play lead trombone in big bands and other groups, but
hey, it's actually kind of a remarkably similar sample pool, and it's cool to see like how different, and like both of them can do both of those things, and it's cool
right.
to see.
And no one would say that either of them have like this weakness or something, but you think about what they do and how they do it and where they do it. Most of the time Andy Martin is in a studio with a microphone close to his bell. That's a very different thing than playing gigantic concert halls with the Jazz Lincoln Center Orchestra. Those are different things, and they obviously have a lot of overlap. But I think that's part of it too. Is what your where your focus of attention is. Is it right here, or is it all the way in the back of the hall? I think that's a relevant thing. Which especially for me recording all these videos in my office. No one knows how big, or not no one, but most people don't know how big or small this room is. And I think that there's an assumption that this is a larger room. That's what all of my friends, whenever they come over for the first time and see the room, they're like, this is a lot smaller than I thought, having seen all of your videos. And I have to play differently in here, especially with the tuba, especially because of what tuba I have. I've got a very large 6-quarter C tuba designed to be used with 80 other people on stage in a large concert hall, and not in an 8 by 10 by 11, almost perfect cube extra bedroom. That's not what they designed it for. So with that, I thought you looked like you had something to say.
No, actually, I did, but I was like, this is off topic. I was looking up because I was thinking. The bully in Like Mike is the same actor as the guy in the Black Mirror episode where they have it's like the spin-off of Star Trek. You know what I'm talking about?
I've never seen an episode of Black Mirror, except that that is a cultural reference. That
don't watch it. It'll make you sad. It just makes me so sad. But they are intriguing. And he was in
Breaking Bad.
I saw. He in Breaking Bad?
He was.
I only saw the last episode of Breaking Bad.
He might have. He was only in the last season and a half. But yeah, he was in Breaking Bad. What was his name? I can't remember his name right now. I literally just watched Breaking Bad again. But yeah. So yes, that bully exists. Jesse
Plemons is the actor's name, in case you're curious. Jesse Plemons.
Gotcha. But yeah, as far as changing your focus of attention depending on the room, I think that is relevant. Even when I play trombone in this room, it's a little bit easier to deal with, just because it's not as large. But playing with the mic in front of you versus playing in a large room, and then also a lot of the performing that I do, I have a microphone clipped onto my bell, and I don't know that at the end of the day that's more reinforcement probably than it is. There's still sound in the room, and I think the sound in the room is probably more important. You kind of, in a perfect world, you don't even think that it's being amplified. Like you don't notice the amplification.
Right.
So it's again a little bit different, but these are all different things that we have to think about. And in some situations, you can only be good at one thing, and that'll be the only thing you have to do. Hasn't been my experience in a career in music that I, only one thing is how I, pay the bills. Maybe one day that'll be the case, but I kind of don't want it to be the case. I like having to have different skills and things and keep working on different skills.
It's fun.
Yeah, I think so. So, just thinking about the room that you're playing in and that sort of thing, I think is really important. It's like especially with recording, that's a really important thing of, where's the microphone? Is it right up on you? Is it all the way in the back of the room? Like those sorts of things kind of change a lot of things, at least for me.
Yeah, I mean, that changes. I completely agree. And it was something that used to frustrate me, especially like particularly in grad school when I feel like I just got my first understanding of like, or I finally had enough experience of like playing into a microphone that I learned how to do it effectively. Or I don't even know if I was doing it effectively.
But you were doing it.
Aware that like the trombone can be an amplified instrument. And I was like, oh, and in my limited view, I was like, so we were always working towards this. Like, this is the goal. I have to play as if there's a microphone at all times. How does this change how I practice inside of a practice room? And I got really confused. And then I would be frustrated when I would practice in a certain way to meet some sort of acoustic goal and then be put in a performance situation that didn't match the soundscape that I had in my head of the environment I thought I was going to be in, to the point that like I would just like chop out and sound horrible if I had to go play a quintet gig with no mics. When the reality is like that no unmiked club sound room should probably just be my preset. Like, and I have had a lot more success playing in a microphone setting. I'm still constantly listening to recordings of trombones and recording myself and learning about microphones and knowing good microphone etiquette. But I think that I win more fights if I learn or assume there's not going to be one, and then I can bring myself down to a softer level otherwise. Because like, yeah, I'm not John Fitchcock. I'm not touring around playing all these amazing clubs and flying around and playing with college big bands with great sound systems in their halls. Like, I'm playing a lot of outside gigs right now. I need to learn how to sound good.
Well, I think
I am right now.
I think in a lot of ways we're all playing outside gigs.
That's
just
true.
given what's going on.
Gigs. And John Fitchcock, as much as we do hear him in great recorded settings, can play anywhere. It's not a limitation. It's an aesthetic decision.
Right. Sorry, I was trying to find something that we could have brought up, but
I have a question.
Yes.
What was the name of that metronome that you were talking about? Time Guru?
Time
metronome?
Guru, yeah. I think
one called Time Guru metronome.
That's probably it. I've had it for so long. Mine just says Time Guru. I mean, you can't really see, but that's what it looks like.
Let me see. Okay, that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah, I've had that forever. Like probably going on a decade with no updates. Does it still cost money?
Costs $2.
Yeah. So, and I'm really against paying for apps on my phone. I've always been against it. But the ones that I pay for, tuners and metronomes. Got to have a good tuner and metronome on my phone.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I still don't have tonal energy on my phone because I've been so salty about it, because I've had an Android phone forever, basically, since they were relevant. And they were an iPhone exclusive app for years, like into college. So I bought this other tuner that works pretty well, and I still like it. And I think it has some benefits over tonal energy. But then I bought tonal energy on my iPad, and I just really hate the idea of paying for it twice.
I wouldn't.
That doesn't sit well with me.
No.
One thing, I did end up finding it. I can throw this on screen here. Just an interesting thing that Bach has a new trombone as of lately. Let's see if I can, is this the right, I gotta have Connor in there. That's not what I want. Let's do music close up, there we go. So the Peter Steiner model.
Oh yeah, I've been seeing him post about it.
And what really caught my attention is it's another company that now has a from the factory to cut bell, screw bell.
Oh yeah, the future of bells is screw on.
I really think it is. I think, a lot of companies are already doing it, but I think we're going to get to a point where that's the only way to do it.
I think what this is just the reality. This is a manifestation of the idea that the airlines won. Like, none of us are getting our money back for our squish trombones.
Right.
And we're just like sick of gate checking these things. So this is just the new world order. I'm okay with it. I've never noticed like a difference in like people that play screw bell trombones, like their sound quality.
I don't think that there's a sound quality issue. My problem, and I haven't done enough research. This is a hard thing to experience unless you get it done yourself. Is what I've had a lot of people who've gotten their bells cut say that nothing changed. I just don't buy that that's possible.
Right, like there's so much going on in the physics of the bell.
We're adding a collar, like we're adding significant weight to the bell that wasn't there before.
Slicing it off at like the most critical point of.
Well, to be fair, most bells are two-piece bells anyway, so you're cutting it on a seam that already existed.
Okay, but even like just like I mean, yes, but like even like resoldering an instrument at some points, like you're like
right,
you're adding some inconsequential amount of metal. You're also mechanically separating that which was schmelted
right
at some point, and you can only do that so many times before it's a different instrument.
Yeah, so I'm happy with this movement. I am yet to purchase my first screw bell, and I just really don't think I'm cutting a bell or getting someone to cut my bell.
I will cut a bell.
You will? You said?
I will. I will cut my Jigs 2B bell.
All right.
I'm willing to wager that.
I'd rather buy it from the factory, or it doesn't have to be. It could be used. There just aren't a lot of used screw bell horns on the market at this point in time.
Not a lot right now.
There'll be more.
Possibly zero.
Yeah, but I'd like to get it where I try this horn, and I know it to be good. I like it as is. Mm-hmm. I think that's something I'm much more interested in than I like this horn. Let's get out the hacks. Let's get the hacksaw out, because they usually just use a saw, like a saw that you could buy at Home Depot. Like it's crazy to me. But yeah, for me, I just have to. I feel like I have to just buy it as it is. But it's nice that Bach is joining the ranks. I don't think they've had one before. I could be wrong.
I haven't seen one.
At least not as of recently. I know that they do custom stuff there from time to time. But as far as like this is one that you could go into a store, try, buy, walk home with. I think that's really really interesting, and I think it's the right direction. Mm-hmm. So, well, I think we should maybe call it there. Connor, do you want to play us out like you did last week?
Yeah. What do you want me to play?
I think maybe just like a chorus of something.
Okay.
And then if you want to make sure that gain gets dropped a little bit.
I'm gonna drop the gain.
And how about this? Since we don't have our own way of communicating with each other, throughout the show, we usually, we just talk. We don't have a separate line of communication, I guess I should say. And end on a long note, okay. And then that'll be the end. That'll be the end of it. Make it clear to me, and then I think I'm actually going to play the intro video that we played at the beginning. I think that might be the thing to do.
Okay.
So that's how it'll end.
Alrighty. Let's think. All right, I'll play a tune.